Well, first of all, let me say thank you for Professor Nick Zangwill to coming and join us and the Roger Scruton in Eastern Europe for 40 years memorial workshop. Well, thank you for coming. Just let me say a few words about you. I mean, Nick Zangwill is a British philosopher and honorary research professor at the University College London and Lincoln University. Well, thank you. Okay, my first question would be, you have been giving extensive lecture on aesthetics and the nature art. Which region to Scruton's theory of aesthetics, what are the similarities and possibilities in your philosophies?
There are a lot of similarities and some differences. I think we agree on which the important issues are, and maybe we're both not so interested in definitional questions, and that's a bit futile in many ways. He's not very interested in defining art, but we both think that questions of value are central. In American aesthetics, North American aesthetics in the 20th century, there was a move against thinking of aesthetics in terms of value and making values such as beauty central to your understanding of many art forms and our aesthetic experience. But I think Scruton rightly, and I agree with him, makes beauty central in a way that it is. Because our experience of the arts has a certain kind of value, which in most cases is best explained by our experience being of beauty. I mean, there are other things going on as well. It's complex in many cases, but beauty's in there and is centrally important. As far as differences go, Scruton always put at the heart of his aesthetics, going right back to his first book, Art and Imagination. He puts the imagination in the center of his views of our aesthetic life. And I'm worried about that, and I think that other faculties of mind are more prominent. I suppose that I generally, and I said this to him once on some steps in London. I said, I don't see how imagination could bring us to know the world. And it seems to me that imagination takes you to another place, but not necessarily to understand how things really are. And I think much of our aesthetic experience is about grasping the wonderful particularity of things, and I'm not sure that the imagination is the right faculty to point to as that with which we do that. Sorry, that was a bad sentence. So I think that's a difference. And I think that's where, according to one of the speakers, I kind of agree that he draws on a more Central European and maybe Germanic tradition, of a romantic tradition of seeing the imagination as a crucial faculty of the mind for understanding the world. And I think the imagination is great. I'm all for it. There should be lots of imagination, but I'm not sure it leads us to understand the world in its own right. It can be part of it. You know, scientists need to imagine things as well. But I think when we grasp things in their wonderful particularity, imagination is not playing the central role, in my view.
Right, thank you. Well, how did the British philosopher observed the time in the Iron Curtain? Well, it might be an open question, and there are a lot of aspects of this.
Well, how did any person view the Iron Curtain era? A philosopher, as David Hume said, a philosopher is also a human being, or roughly in those words. Yeah, I mean, you know, I before I became a philosopher, you know, the Iron Curtain was always there. It was eternal. That was why 1989 was such a shock to everyone, or such a surprise. No one expected it. There was no one who predicted it. On the left or the right, academics, ordinary people, everyone thought it was eternal. They assumed that. And I suppose for people in the West, there was always a mysteriousness or an otherness about the Iron Curtain. And people weren't very clear on what was happening there. It was a sort of mystical or mysterious projected sense of what was going on there. And very few people had any interest or concern with the reality. It was a projection, both for those politically on the left who manufactured excuses for how really wonderful it was and how the capitalist press was lying. And, you know, for the James Bond films, and for which it was, it was a place of fantasy. So the reality of it was, didn't really figure in anyone's actual consciousness, except a few tiny number of people like Roger Scruton who actually went there. I did go on a trip to the Soviet Union, but it was carefully stage managed. This was in the early 80s, carefully stage managed so that one saw just exactly what you were supposed to see. So it's like the question on aesthetics. Was it imagination or was it grasping reality? And I think there was very little grasp of what it was actually like there. There was very little information. Maybe there was information there, but people didn't want to process it. So I'm not really talking as a philosopher there. I'm just talking as someone that was living in the West. It always had a certain romance, I suppose, for people, funnily enough. In fact, the reality wasn't romantic. You know, in my own case, my family background is partly Russian and Polish, so there was always a kind of appreciation of Russian cultural things, a love of Russian culture, which is great in many respects, obviously, which sometimes spilled over to political sympathy when it shouldn't have done. I mean, in my own family, my grandfather he was a Russian, an immigrant from Russian Latvia, and his daughters then both became communists, who were my mother. And I've got the record of their letters, you know, during the wartime. And the daughters were apologetic, who had never been to Russia. It was just a place in their imaginations. And he, being Russian, had a very good grip of the nature of the beast, and was really very critical of the Soviet system. And so these letters are fascinating to watch that play out.
Wow. And just the last question is, what do you think actually, what was Roger Scruton's mission in this region?
What do I think his mission was?
Yes.
At bottom, probably just a simple concern with freedom. At bottom.
Well, thank you for your answers. It was pretty interesting, and enjoy the rest of the work.
I will do. Thank you so much. Thank you.